If you ever wished you had a wise grandpa to teach you things, this is for you. A young man asked his grandpa for some life advice, but instead of saying anything, the grandpa handed the young man 2 cactuses. Perplexed, the young man asked what these cactuses had anything to do with his decision. "Plant one of these in my backyard, then keep the other on your windowsill back home," he instructed. "The cactuses will give you clarity." But many months went by, and the young man hadn't learned anything. "Still nothing," the young man sighed when he returned to his grandpa's house many months later. "But did you look out the back window?" His grandpa grinned, because there stood a thriving cactus much bigger than the one on the windowsill. "You see," the grandpa smiled, "the conditions outside are much hotter and harsher than those on the windowsill. Yet the outdoor cactus thrived while the indoor cactus just survived. That's what we humans have in common with cactuses. Put us in a comfortable setting and we'll be just fine." But all of those who have grown first ventured out of their comfort zone. "But Grandpa," the young man objected, "if we didn't live in the desert, the indoor cactus would surely do better." "Aha," his grandpa smiled. "You see, we often hear the words, 'grow where you're planted.' But the problem is, you wouldn't find a cactus thriving in the Arctic. It's just as important to get out of your comfort zone as it is to make sure you're in the right environment." "But how will I know if it's right?" the young man asked. To this, his grandpa smiled. "You'll know," he said. The problem was, the young man winded up in the exact wrong environment just a short while later. Instead of pursuing his passion, he found himself in a job that slowly ate away at him. Because he disliked it so much, he woke up each day dreading work. That was when he saw it. On the windowsill, where he had placed it on day 1, a now dry and nearly dead cactus. It was his sign. A wave of emotions flooded him as he remembered his grandpa's lesson. Without a second thought, he put in his 2 weeks, called his grandpa, and made plans to stop by that very same day. "You were right," he cheered as he strolled inside, the potted cactus in hand. His grandpa raised a cautious eyebrow. "What do you mean?" The young man went on to explain that he had never left his comfort zone by taking a job he deemed as safe, but that now he was ready to pursue his true passion, to reclaim the time he had wasted. But as he finished speaking, he was surprised by his grandpa's reaction. "Well," he said, "I think there's something you may have missed. Come with me." Outside, just a few steps away from the thriving cactus they had planted together, was the shattered remains of a clay pot. The same clay pot that once held the cactus. "Let me ask you," the grandpa said as he kneeled down for one of the pieces, "what purpose do you feel the clay pot serves?" Perplexed once again, the young man shrugged. "I'll tell you," his grandpa smirked. "It's all about time. Time for the cactus to lengthen its roots. Time for it to sprout. And time for it to get a strong foundation for it to hopefully one day thrive in a backyard like this. You mentioned that you wanted to reclaim the time you had wasted, but you see, the time wasn't wasted at all. Even if you weren't in the right place, you needed the time in your personal clay pot to explore your options, time to make mistakes, and time to learn what truly matters." With his grandpa's words at heart, the young man knelt down with his struggling cactus, removing it from its clay pot and planting it a few steps away from the cactus that started at the same time. His grandpa noticed him eyeing the much larger cactus. "He'll catch up quick, you can be sure of that," his grandpa chuckled. "But as with cactuses that started at the same time, you may feel tempted to compare yourself to those your same age, or even younger, those who started pursuing your very same passion just a few years earlier. But if you noticed, no 2 cactuses look exactly alike. They grow arms in different places. Our journeys unfold in different ways too, so just focus on your own growth rather than let the beauty of your journey seem lesser just because it's different." With his grandpa's wisdom at heart, the young man headed off. But before he could leave, his grandpa had one last piece of wisdom to share. That if you get stuck with a few prickers along the way, then that's part of the journey too. This ant did the impossible, and his story will totally change how you think about the hole you've dug yourself into. It goes a little something like this. A curious and mischievous boy found himself at the beach. He wanted to stay home and play video games, so since he was dragged away, he was looking for trouble. That's when he spotted the plastic bucket and shovel his parents had brought for him, so he started digging. It wasn't long before he had carved out a formidable hole, deeper and wider with each scoop. Meanwhile, he was completely unaware of the ants venturing nearby. As he was admiring his handiwork, a rogue wave splashed splashed all over the ant colony, separating one from the group. Now, a far cry from its colony, this lone ant ventured around frantically searching for his comrades. That's when he discovered the hole. Thinking they may have ducked into it for shelter, he made his way down. A tragic misstep. He quickly found himself tumbling into the abyss. What had started as a routine expedition for food on the beach was now a desperate struggle for survival. As the ant tried to make his way out of the hole, the walls were too wet and slippery. Just as the little boy went to take his first bite out of a cupcake he brought to the beach, he noticed the ant. He reasoned that if he couldn't be home and play his video games as he had wanted, he might as well make the ant's life difficult too. As he watched the ant crawl up the wall, then fall down, then crawl up, then fall down again, his curiosity grew. Initially, he observed with a sense of detachment, but as boredom crept in, he decided to pick up his shovel and scoop a pile of sand onto the ant. To the little boy, the gentle wind and back and forth of the waves made the beach peaceful and calming. But to the ant, an avalanche had just fallen on top of him. His world had gone dark. To the boy's astonishment, however, the ant was not one to give up easily. With remarkable determination and grit, he burrowed his way back to the surface before the little boy could even turn to get his cupcake. Emboldened by the ant's defiance, the boy's actions escalated from playful to mean-spirited. He scooped an even larger pile of sand onto the ant, thinking this would surely end the game. To the ant, this felt like he was rocked by an earthquake and an avalanche at the same time. But yet again, with a whole lot of digging, the ant emerged undeterred and alive. His tiny legs worked tirelessly to escape, but even after surfacing, he was still deep in the hole, this time just a touch closer to the beach. Frustrated and determined to win this battle, the boy fetched a full bucket of sand. In one fell swoop, he had completely filled the hole, the ant buried deep inside. That ought to do it, he grinned, convinced that no creature could escape such a trap. Yet, the ant's spirit was unbreakable. Against all odds, he surfaced once again. But unlike the last time, the hole was finally filled. He was now back to the surface of the beach, free from the hole entirely. This made the little boy furious. With his fist clenched around his shovel and his sights locked onto the ant, he planned to squish him instead of bury him. But before he could act, a gasp from his mother turned his attention elsewhere. While the boy was focusing on his sandy siege, he had neglected a precious treasure, the cupcake he had been saving. At this point, he hadn't even taken a bite yet. In a twist of fate, the ant colony, having noticed their missing scout, launched a rescue operation, but their search led them directly to the unguarded cupcake. By the time the boy turned his attention back, it was too late. The cupcake was swarming with ants, a feast for the colony and a bitter lesson in karma for the boy. But the real lesson here lies with resilience. Just as the ant was constantly battling the sand being thrown on him, life will throw hardships, failures, and setbacks onto us. But if you noticed, every time more sand came the ant's way, he ascended a little bit higher in the hole. When we do the same, surfacing after each challenge, we too can ascend out of whatever hole we've dug ourselves into. A seagull saved this man's life, but not before he crashed his sailboat. He had pulled together all of his savings to buy it, but a brutal storm sent him well off course. As a result, he was left stranded on an uncharted island after the sailboat hit a coral reef and sunk. Ashore, he survived for weeks and then months without any sign of rescue. Then one day, a seagull came out of nowhere and snatched the one thing the man depended on for survival, and one of the only things he salvaged from the wreck, his fishing lure, one he had since he was a little boy with his name engraved on it. He tried to catch the seagull, but it was too late. Enraged, he cursed the sky and his misfortune. He hadn't seen a bird the entire time. Why now? From here on out, his only food would have to come from whatever he could scrounge up in the tide pools. The man's trials on the island only seemed to intensify with each passing day. After the loss of his cherished fishing lure, his fortunes took another hit when the same seagull, in a twist of fate that seemed almost personal, swooped down and took the only piece of flint he had found. This flint was crucial for starting fires, an essential part of his survival. Watching the bird fly away with it, a part of him wanted to give up. Once again, he cursed the sky and planned to turn the seagull into dinner the next time he saw it. Without a flint, he was forced to innovate by using the friction between two branches to start a fire. He had only seen this done in the movies, but somehow it worked. However, just as he began to find a new rhythm, disaster struck again. The seagull, as if harboring a vendetta, returned. This time, its target was the rainwater catch he had painstakingly crafted after days of trial and error, cuts on his hands, and the patience he never knew he possessed. In a moment of carelessness fueled by exhaustion and frustration, he chased the bird as it landed, causing it to flail and knock the structure onto the jagged rocks below. The catch shattered, leaving him without his primary source of fresh water. This loss was the last straw. He fell to his knees, salty tears stinging his burnt face. Feeling beaten and on the brink of giving up, he knew he had to do something drastic. He needed to find a spring with fresh water, if there even was one on this island. Out of necessity, he decided to climb to the island's highest point, a task he had previously deemed too energy-consuming to attempt. The climb was arduous, pushing him to the absolute limit. At the summit, exhausted and out of breath, he didn't find any sign of a spring. What he did see was a cargo ship on the far horizon. Using his newfound skill, he started a bonfire as quick as he could. Fortunately, he was in the best possible place on the island to get attention. Sure enough, the ship continued heading straight in his direction. He rushed to the shore, then he was saved. When he got on board, he asked how they had found him. The captain laughed, informing him that the seagulls had remained on board for many nautical miles. But when one dropped a fishing lure, they noticed his name on it and headed to the closest island. But had the seagull not taken the man's lure, the ship never would have come close. And had the seagull not taken his flint, which he easily could have left on the shore during his ascent, he may not have been able to start the signal fire. And had the seagull not destroyed his rainwater catch, he may never have spotted the ship in the first place. Similarly, our adversity in life often forces us to adapt, learn new skills, and ascend beyond our comfort zone, just as the man had done. And so, the story of the man and the seagull lives on in our everyday lives, because there's always a plan for us in life, even when our misfortune seems to get the best of us.